Okay, great. Welcome all to this evening, the first of, well, for me, this parent university. And, the topic of conversation tonight, we're going to be discussing the teenage son, helping them through this critical age. Okay. So, just to give a little bit of background information about myself. My name is Bernard Clark Jr. I am, 49 years old. I've been teaching for 20 plus years in education, specifically at the middle school level. So I've, come across, hundreds of teenage boys. I'm a father of three children. I have two daughters, one at 26 and 25, and a son at 19. So I've gone through literally the gambit with the teenage son. Okay, so I kind of chose this picture for a reason. It was just a collage of young, bright, energetic boys that really speaks to the high energy. You look at all these pictures. A lot of these boys look very, very well put together, and that's not always the case. When we're coming to boys, and if we can go to the next slide, this
So I just
particular.
wanted to introduce myself really
Oh, I'm
quickly.
sorry. I'm sorry. You're right,
You're
Mrs.
fine.
Hilton. Floor is yours.
You are fine. So my name is Miss Hilson, and I am the school counselor at Colt Street. So I work with grades 6 through 10. However, if you have a teenage son in grades 6 through 10, we're still going to be able to answer a lot of your questions on tonight. All right, Mr. Clark, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Ms. Hilson, and I appreciate we co-hosting together. This is my first co-hosting event, so I'll try to be more inclusive. I'm sorry, sometimes I can get verbose. I'm sorry, but these books that I wanted to kind of like share at the very beginning or the outset of this conversation, because I would like it to be a dialogue, a conversation. These books were very instrumental for me in my academic career. Trying to gather an understanding of how teenage boys behave, think, especially within the larger context of American society. Okay, with all of its concerns, as we are trying to create a more perfect union. So the emotional literacy, with teenage boys. One in particular that really drives my own analysis, countering the conspiracy to destroy Black boys. Jawanza Kunjufu had read several of his texts. And then, Dr. Umar Johnson on, this whole idea of, special education and the Holocaust of it, so to speak. And then the seven habits of highly effective teens. I just wanted to, share that in terms of a pool of resources. I don't know if you wanted to kind of chime in on that, Ms. Hilson. Okay, so we can go to this next slide to get us kind of started. This is just one of the points of view that really, shook me up when I was at Rutgers University. I did my bachelor's work at Rutgers University in New Brunswick. And I remember I was a English and African studies major. And I remember one of the first African American studies courses I took, we came across this scholar, Joanza Kunjufu. And, I was in education. So I was on my route to becoming a teacher. And this particular idea, this point of view that I took from this first text, one of these texts I introduced, countering the conspiracy to destroy Black boys, authored by Jawanza Kunjufu. He argues in the book that most Black boys that end up dropping out of school make up their minds as early as fourth grade. So between fourth and eighth grades, they are simply going through the motions. Okay. So, and that was really profound for me because it made me think about my own tenure as a child in that age bracket. And, school was not a priority. Okay. And around those middle school years. And one of the things that I took away from the quote was the fact that I was dealing with a trauma in my life. And ultimately, I think as I've looked at this, topic of Black boys throughout my years in education, one of the threads that kind of weaves through many of these boys that are experiencing a disconnect from school, a lot of it stems from some trauma that may have gone unprocessed. Okay. And unfortunately, I think a lot of teenage boys, especially when you're dealing with, puberty and development, all these issues, a lot of them tend to suppress a lot of their trauma. And then it comes out in other ways that kinds of takes them away from the school environment. So I just wanted to start with this question. How do we know when a child is no longer interested in school? I think it's almost I'm teaching students now, and I'm noticing in several of my classes, maybe I want to say 30% of the boys are highly motivated. Okay. I'm talking come to class every day. I got a group of students, literally about 6 boys, and these are all boys. Every morning in my Rochester class, I have about 6 boys who come in every morning, the first students, and literally they get their books out and they begin taking ownership of the classroom. Highly motivated. But then when I look at the other percentage of students, boys, there's some level of motivation I got to bring to them. So, I'm noticing the disconnect in many of those students. So I just wanted to open up with this question, and hopefully, we can, have some type of Socratic discussion about this question. And maybe you don't agree with that, question, but the question still stands. How do you know when a child is no longer interested in school? Like, what are some of the indicators that lets us know that they're disconnected from school?
So, Mr. Clark, I really would love to answer that question. So, some of the signs that we can see is maybe your child no longer wants to do their homework as much as they used to. Also, they may not want to attend school, so they'll do different type of avoidance behaviors. They're always sick, always needing for some reason to go home really early. So those could be signs that they're no longer interested in school. We can also, most parents understand that there's a shift that happens with their child. They may not be as happy anymore. They may make comments like, my teachers don't like me. They may also make comments and be very dismissive of when you ask them about their homework. You ask them about why don't they understand this, or why aren't they asking questions. And a lot of it can come down to the types of questions that we ask. So oftentimes we tend to ask a lot of closed questions. Why are you doing this? Or what's wrong with you, right? And those type of questions don't always invoke a very open atmosphere for students to feel comfortable to share that they might not understand something. There may have been a concept that they learned in school, and once they reached that concept, they were lost. And so, yes, they've been going through the motions, but they really don't understand what's happening. And so it can be things like, could you share with me about your day? Well, how was this? How did you do today in this particular class? Or share with me something new that you learned today in the class, especially a subject that you know that they're struggling in. Those types of questions, or you can even say something like, hey, can you come here? They might have a bad grade on a test. Hey, tell me, what's going on with this? What's going on with this isn't accusing them of failing the test, not studying. It actually allows them to be able to open up and tell you why they failed the test, what happened, what disconnect was going on, if they studied or they didn't study. Mr. Clark also mentioned another really good point about trauma. Sometimes when we think of trauma, we may think of something like the World Trade Center happening or war. But trauma can really be that the person that they saw at the corner store every day was just murdered last night, and that changed their world. It could also be that their favorite animal was hit by a car, right? And so trauma looks different for every person. We do not know how it's going to affect them. And trauma may not always affect everyone the same way. You may have two children, and I love using this example. You may have two children, and similar to how you can tell each one the same message, you know that you have to convey it a little differently for each child. So, for example, if you need to tell one child, well, the message is you need to get out the house. One child, you may be able to say it very calmly and they'll accept it. And then the other child, you may have to be a little bit more dramatic, and that's okay. And so trauma affects people the same way. Both may see their favorite animal get hit by a car, right? One person may process it and say, hey, that's life. Okay. The other child may find it extremely traumatic that their favorite animal was just murdered in front of them. So I do want us to be very clear that trauma does not always mean some grand gesture that has happened. It can be something very simple, a day to day activity. It could also be an argument that they see happen frequently. Trauma looks different for everyone. And so I do want us to be very clear that it's not this blanketed concept, but it can be different.
Some follow-ups there, because I love that commentary. I really do. I learned a lot from that. But I'm asked this follow-up. Could trauma also be not having something to eat? Could trauma also be getting in trouble with a parent? And how then does that translate into the child's performance in school, where in some environments, depending on the classroom environment, I'm a big advocate of, management and engagement in the classroom. I am, a helicopter teacher. So I'm hovering over students to make sure that they're pushing them to perform. And, sometimes that student that may be dealing with some trauma might push back, as opposed to those students who embrace the direction. How do we begin as teachers, okay, to, what strategies would you, give us to utilize in the classroom when dealing with these boys in particular? What would you suggest for us to deal with students, and also identifying that trauma within the classroom? Because that's a whole nother, avenue to think about, because some teachers, who may not embrace that idea, might want to be, punitive. You see a student that is disconnected, and your first thought is, get out, go to the, administrator, but not realizing that those are golden moments, to maybe, input and redirect students. What do you say about to that?
I will definitely share that gone are the days when mental health is something that we do not talk about as often. And so parents being open to teachers when teachers mention that, hey, we've noticed something different about your child. Because sometimes parents just may not catch it. And that's normal. There's nothing wrong. You're not a bad parent. It's just that sometimes children react differently in different settings, and that's okay. But we are here as a school to partner with parents and not partner up against you. So if a teacher does notice some changing, some different types of behaviors, I would definitely recommend for the teacher to reach out to the parent, but also on this parent platform for parents to be a little bit more open. It's okay. Teenagers, sixth graders, seventh graders, eighth graders, 9 and 10, and 11 and 12, they do experience depression. And that's something that isn't what you know about depression, right? That's not real. You're fine. I feed you, I clothe you, I take you everywhere you need to go. Why are you depressed? You have nothing to be depressed about. And oftentimes, and I understand why, right? It's normalized in the generation that you grew up in. However, our students are learning more and more about mental health. They're learning more about realizing certain things when they're not feeling okay. And so
Mhm.
they're here to try to express those things to you. And so even if it doesn't really make a lot of sense, while you're trying to figure it out, they're trying to figure it out as well. So I would really just recommend for parents to be a lot open to when your student comes to you and says, or the teacher comes to you and shares that something is wrong. We may not know what's wrong, but hey, there's health insurance. If you don't have health insurance, we do have resources at the school that myself or the social worker can provide to you to help you find those counseling services so that we can get to the bottom of it. It's nothing wrong for your child to talk to one of us, but we can only do short term counseling. And yes, our social worker can do long term counseling, but sometimes they may need outside help. And there's nothing wrong with that. And we're here to support you.
Thank you for that insight, Ms. Hilson. So, I wanted to open up this, conversation, with that piece, just to segue into maybe some questions that parents may have. So this particular Do Now activity, write a question in the chat that you would like to discuss concerning your teenage boy. And not sure if we have any questions in the chat. So if we can take a second to maybe examine that. And if you have a question, Miss Hilson, about generally about teenage boys, maybe we could because I have a question, but I'll wait. I'll see if you have a question you want to throw out there. Maybe we could start to kind of like tackle that a little bit.
I did want to share that if any parents are watching this as a recording, that and you do have questions either as we're talking or after all the material, you can email me. My email is A as in apple, H as in Harry, I as in ice cream, L as in Larry, L as in Larry, S as in Sam, O as in Oscar, and N as in Nancy at collegeachieve.org. So again, my email is ahilson with two L's in it. At collegeachieve.org if you are watching this re-recording and you do have questions after, and we will more than likely be happy to answer your question as quickly as possible.
Amen. And I also will give my email. I'm bclark@collegeachieve.org. So any questions, I'm always open to dialogue with parents. But one of the questions I do have in concerning the teenage boy, is this question of maturity. I hear the statement a lot, that girls are more mature than boys, or they mature faster than boys. Maybe some of the conversations that girls engage in are more higher level, maybe than boys. So my question is, what creates this dichotomy in society where girls are maturing faster than boys? Is that, if that's even the case? Okay. And I wanted to really tackle that idea, because ultimately, if there are certain things taking place in society that's creating this maturity, this imbalanced maturity between girls and boys, maybe that'll provide us with some insight into dealing with and understanding teenage boys moving forward. So I don't know if you wanted to kind of like tackle that question a little bit, Ms. Hilson, with your expertise.
Developmental studies just have shown that girls do mature faster than boys. I do not have the studies in front of me, but it is known that girls do mature faster than boys. If a parent is interested, please reach out to me and I will be able to send you the articles for you to read on your own about developmental theorists who have found that girls do mature a little bit faster than boys.
Okay, so I definitely would love to be a part of that, email, to get some insight on that, because ultimately, and as a classroom teacher, one of the things I notice is, when I'm looking at the girls versus the boys, I do sense that, girls tend to, engage, more directly, as opposed to maybe some of the boys. There's a certain aloofness with some of the boys, and we're talking about children at the same age group, 11, 12, and 13. So that's a very interesting idea to mull around. But if we go to the next slide, we're going to start getting into the conversation of understanding the teenage boy. And so I just wanted to read over this first slide. And then, hopefully, Ms. Hilson, you'll read over the next slide, and we'll kind of like extend the conversation. But understanding your teen's emotional health. As a teacher, and I'm gonna just preface this, statement with this idea. When we're teaching to the child, we're not just teaching, to their academic level. We're also teaching to their social reality. Okay, we're kind of guiding students along this, path of emotional development. So their emotional health is very critical to understanding, their circumstances. So, the teenage years are, and most of this presentation I, siphon from a variety of different sources. I'm pretty much a facilitator as a teacher. These ideas are to give conversation, to provide an avenue or conduit towards conversing. So the teenage years, and I'll just read this out, are a time of transition from childhood into adulthood. Teens often have a strong desire to be independent, so they may struggle with still being dependent on their parents. They may also feel overwhelmed by the emotional and physical changes they're experiencing. Teens may be facing a number of other pressures. So, I kind of included this slide to, have the conversation about the teens' emotional health. One of the things I noticed in working with these, young men is a acute interest in girls, and oftentimes this is where the difference of maturity will come into play. Some girls, even though they might engage these, conversations off task with boys, one thing I notice is that girls can maintain their focus and get their work done and get the job done, while at the same time entertaining the frivolous behavior of some of the boys. But some of the boys will abandon the work altogether, in showing that interest. So how do we navigate in these circumstances to maybe elevate the emotional maturity of boys? How do we, tackle that as a school community? You want to move on to the second, or you want to chime in on that?
No, I mean, we can talk about emotional health. I think, and this is just a personal Miss Wilson observation, is really teaching our young men how to multitask, how to definitely learn how to juggle more than one thing. Then sometimes we tend to just let our boys focus on that one thing and we don't want to interrupt them, right? But if
Mm-hmm.
it's one of our young ladies, we will say, okay, well, I know you're coloring, but you need to also do the laundry and cook while you're coloring. But if it's some of our young men, we will just tell them, like, nope, they're coloring, they're quiet, we're going to leave them alone. So I really think it's teaching our young men how to multitask, which is a common thing that
Mm.
most men just do not do. Um, and it's just a common thing that we've all done in raising our young men. I will say, as our young men are looking at partners, that is something else. Now is the time to teach them how to be respectful.
Mm-hmm.
Now is the time to have those difficult conversations where they're looking at social media and seeing socially acceptable behaviors, but that does not always mean that those socially acceptable behaviors are appropriate. And so, really having those difficult conversations, and once again, leading with a lot of open questions. Tell me, what were your thoughts on the NFL player that just happened today? The NFL player, former NFL player, I think he played for the Jets, but I definitely know he went to Vanderbilt. What are your thoughts about him abusing his ex-girlfriend in front of their child? What were your thoughts about that? And really understand the concept of what are they thinking about, and really, catching those things at an earlier age than waiting until, something happens later on. So I will transition to the next slide.
Okay.
And so one of the things that we notice about our teenage sons is that they're doing their best to fit in school and amongst their friends. And so fitting in is a primary concern for just about every adolescent. They seek relationships with others based on shared interests, and sometimes cliques can seem to surface. Students are really trying to figure out, especially teenagers at this time, what does it mean to be independent versus fitting in with a group? And this is why it's so important for students to be back in school. And I know it's COVID and I know it can be dangerous, but these are the age groups where they're figuring out who they are, how to be independent while yet trying to figure out what does it mean to have friends? What does it mean to fit in with the crowd? And so these are very trying years because they're trying to figure it out on their own. And so I think one of the best things that we can do is support them and guide them to talk about what is a healthy relationship. And relationship doesn't mean liking someone. Relationship means parent relationship, teacher relationships, same-sex relationships, all different types of ships that they may encounter. What does a healthy relationship look like? How should we speak to one another? When making a lot of those critical thinking skills, when do you think it's time to not follow the crowd? Is it okay to not fit in? And what does that look like? Are there other people who aren't fitting in? And what does that look like? So, really having a lot of these conversations and trying our best not to necessarily yell at them and say, what were you thinking? That was dumb. Why would you follow your friends? But really, once again, changing the questions to say, well, your friends did that. What made you think it was a good idea? Or not what made you think it was a good idea, but, share with me what was going on at that time. What was happening that, you decided that that was the best choice for you to make? Could you have made a different choice? And they'll hear it in the back of your heads, but it's also a lot of that critical thinking. Why? Because we're transitioning them and preparing them for adulthood. And in adulthood, they have to make these decisions, these tough decisions. Should I stand alone or should I follow the crowd? What does that look like? And so really, this is the practice round for life after high school, because how we set them up in high school is how we're going to set them up for adulthood. And so these are the building block years. You ready to start for the
Absolutely.
next slide?
Yes. Yeah, we can move right on to the next slide. Okay, so doing well in school and making good grades. If you suspect your teen is falling behind, consider it a sign that he needs some extra support. And the sooner you step in, the better. It's easier to catch up on missed work and difficult concepts when they are only a little bit behind. And I wanted to, one of the reasons I wanted to discuss this idea, as a classroom teacher, we, notice that, when students are not engaged, okay, and this goes back to that whole idea of, dealing with some trauma. Sometimes, children don't know how to access their better selves, because they're blocking their own development in a lot of ways. So a child will come into the classroom And when the learning process begins, you have some children who are socially prepared for that environment. So the teacher goes through these processes to create these lessons, and then the child comes into the classroom, and when all of the children are engaging one another, going back to what you said in the last slide, a lot of the boys who are trying to fit in, there's always this, the girls like the bad boy, reality that a lot of these, young men are facing. So if they're, trying to engage these relationships with, certain girls that they are interested in, and they're watching the behavior of those young ladies, and those young ladies give a lot of attention to maybe the boy who cuts up in class, who thinks it, okay to be disruptive and to take away from their, own individual learning. When these boys start to fall behind, especially when in looking in, comparison to maybe some of their female counterparts, those, young ladies are excelling. I, had a test yesterday, a selection test from a text that we studied, and literally, the top 8 grades, were young ladies. The top 8 grades were young ladies, and the bottom 8 grades were young men. So that imbalanced performance. What are some of the, my thought is, what are some of the things that we can do as teachers, as parents, as individuals invested in this experience, to help, though, not just identify, early on when those individuals are thank you for that, when those individuals are in those spaces. But I just wanted to have that idea, so we can move on, Ms. Olson.
All right, just wanted
Please.
to ask for a lot of my sports parents. Doing well in school, sports can be an incentive to do well in school. So often I see my high school seniors wait until senior year to realize that grades are important. So, a little information: in order for a player to qualify in high school to play sports their sophomore, junior, and senior year, they have to pass essentially 6 of their classes. They need 30 credits from the following school year in order to qualify to play. So if they only do well during football season or basketball season or track, soccer, lacrosse, whatever the sport may be, and they don't do well the other seasons and they end up failing, they may not qualify to play their favorite sport again. Also, when it comes time for recruitment, a lot of my students may be excellent athletes, but what holds them back are their grades and their GPAs. And too often, coaches have to say, I'm sorry, they don't have the GPA requirement. And I know what you may be thinking. Oh, they can reclass. Other people are doing that. You may think also, oh, they'll just go to a junior college. Everyone is doing that. What is setting your baby apart? The thing that will set your baby apart is having good grades. So, really pushing them to have those good grades. And they don't have to have the best, right? They just can't have any D's or F's. They need to at least have a C, C plus the best, the highest. And that will get their foot in the door a lot easier than waiting until their senior year to get it together. So if you can start off in the 6th grade talking about how important grades are, especially if your baby is the star on the Pop Warner team or whatever the league team may be, then it will really help out. Next, excelling in activities such as sports. Every year, millions of teenagers in the United States participate in team sports. These team sports are just an added value to the community to help hold your child accountable for their actions. As a school counselor, I work very closely with coaches. If your child plays a sport that we do not have at the school, I will reach out to the coach and send their report cards to let them know, like, hey, this is what your kids are doing in the building. And so it's very important to remember that sports are a great outlet, but they also can help hold your baby accountable, not only during the season of the sport or sports, but even after. Why? Because it's a means to an end, to make sure that they actually get into the school that they want.
Excellent. So participating as a member of the family, our all of our boys are, coming from home environments, and I come from a school of thought where the parent is the first teacher. So when the child is coming into our environment, we're looking at the whole child, okay, and when the partnership between home and family is optimal, children understand their role in the school and they're socially prepared for that. But again, going back to those situations where trauma is involved, sometimes the child is coming in having, holding on to that trauma, and they're not letting anyone in, including family. So a lot of the things that we deal with teenage boys, if that partnership between home and school is strong, I want to know all of my parents. I want the parents to know what's going on in the classroom at all times, because a lot of times they can nip things in the bud as they are coming up. So for out of respect for time, because we have about 8 more minutes for this presentation, Ms. Hilson, we could just move on to the next slide and try to start wrapping this presentation up.
All right. So let's start preparing for college and the next step in life. Everyone may not go to college. Our goal at College Achieve is to prepare our scholars to not only be accepted, but to excel and graduate from the top colleges and universities in the nation. And that is our job. And so we are doing our best in the building to prepare our scholars for college by giving them very rigorous work. And so we do ask for help as well at home. Let's start talking about college. And even if you don't know much, it's okay. There are programs out here to help out. There are free programs for my teenagers who are going into their freshman and sophomore year. There's the Upward Bound program at Montclair State University. It's completely free. There are classes that students can take, programs that will take them on college trips. For example, we had a partnership with the Omega Teens, and they will help take boys out and learn about college as well. So preparing for college or the next step. And that next step may also be that your baby is a hands-on learner and college may not be for them, but they can still go to trade school. And the same information that they need to know for college is the same information they need to know for trade school, which means they need to know, they need to be able to write. They still need to be able to know math. They still need to be able to apply for financial aid. So all of those components work for trade schools as well as college or even the military.
Absolutely. So in the path to improved health, communicating your love for your child is the single most important thing you can do to help them during their teenage years, and I put a gold stamp of approval on that point. One thing I notice about children at that age group is they want acceptance from everyone in their space, and especially teachers. I think one of the biggest things that our task as teachers, is to make impacting connections with our students. I think it's very difficult to provide instruction to children who think you don't love them, I think you don't care about them. Especially, when teenagers are in actively seeking approval, but at the same time, they're moving towards a more independent space. Okay. So, I think, one of the key ingredients to this process is, and I'm going to use this word very deliberately, unconditional love. Not judging our children by their circumstances or situations, but treating them fairly on a level playing field, while at the same time being that nurturer, for them. I think those are, some critical things. And just to continue to read, children decide how they feel about themselves in large part by how their parents react to them. For this reason, it's important for parents to help their children feel good about themselves. You can do this by, ultimately, giving your child your attention, being there for them emotionally. Okay, not brushing off their concerns or feelings, but dealing with them head on throughout the whole process. From the inception of the reality to the conclusion of where it has gone. So those are some of the ideas that just wanted to throw out there.
All right. So, in conclusion, we really just want to say that we are here to really partner with you. We are not here to attack you as parents. We never want any parent to feel bad about the choices that their scholar decides to make, because you are raising them in the best home that you can. You're doing everything for them, and sometimes they just make poor decisions, and it's their decision. You are not a bad parent because your teenage son has decided to make certain decisions. They are figuring themselves out right now, as independent students, as independent people, and it's a process that they have to go through. And so, really holding them accountable for their actions, guiding them through different choices that they're making, using open dialogue as well, and remembering to please partner with us because we love your babies. We show up every day to work because we do love your children. And so we care about them, we're invested in them just as much as you are. And so please do not leave us out of the process when it comes time for needing help and needing to understand your scholar. Once again, my name is Miss Hilson. I am the school counselor, and this is Mr. Clark, our wonderful seventh grade English teacher. And we just want to thank you guys so much for listening to us on tonight. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Have a good night.
Have a good night. Thank you, Ms. Hilson.